Vladimir Putin, former Tsar of all the Russias, master of the bear ride and aficionado of shirtless horseback adventures, blinked. Gone was his opulent office. Gone were his stern portraits. In their place, potatoes. Potatoes as far as the eye could see. "What is this nonsense?" he boomed, his voice echoing strangely in the starchy air. This was no dacha, this was no gulag, this was weird. A disembodied giggle, high-pitched and mischievous, answered him. "Welcome, Vlad, to your new potato paradise." Putin shuddered. He hated potatoes. He tried to summon his guards, his advisors, anyone, but there was only silence, broken only by the rustle of potato plants in the strange, ethereal breeze. The potato dimension was, to put it mildly, bizarre. The sky was a perpetual shade of mashed potato grey. The rivers flowed with what appeared to be sour cream, though Putin wasn't brave enough to try it. The trees, if you could call them that, sprouted misshapen tubers that resembled his own face. It was enough to make a man go mad. "This is absurd!" Putin roared at a passing cloud, which naturally resembled a giant fluffy potato. His words were met with another round of disembodied laughter. It seemed the potato dimension found his predicament hilarious. Putin, never one to back down from a challenge, decided to explore. Surely there had to be a way out of this starchy purgatory. He hadn't walked far when he encountered them, a group of spectral figures shimmering faintly against the potato-scape. They were Russians, he could tell, but their faces were blurred, their voices a haunting chorus. "Vladimir, my pension," wailed one. "Vladimir, our free press," moaned another. "Vladimir, my son died in a pointless war," cried a third. Putin recognized them now, the souls of those he had wronged, silenced, or simply ignored during his reign. And they were here, it seemed, to make his afterlife a living hell. Putin, a flicker of fear in his eyes, turned to flee, but the spectral Russians were everywhere, their cries echoing after him. The first prank was subtle. An unbearable itch that started at the back of Putin's neck and spread like wildfire. He scratched and scratched, but the itching only intensified. "Is this the best you can do?" he yelled, his voice shaky with frustration. The laughter returned, louder this time, and with it a new torment. His once impeccable uniform, tailored to perfection, began to shrink. The sleeves rode up his arms, the trousers constricted around his waist, and the collar seemed determined to choke him. Putin, red-faced and sweating, looked like a toddler trapped in his father's suit. The spectral Russians howled with laughter. This, it seemed, was their idea of amusement. Section 5. Phantom traffic jams of St. Petersburg. The potato dimension, it turned out, had a knack for recreating the most mundane annoyances and transforming them into exquisite tortures. It was a place where the ordinary became extraordinary in the most frustrating ways. Take, for example, the traffic jams. These weren't just any traffic jams, they were the epitome of frustration and absurdity. One moment Putin was trudging through a field of potato plants, feeling the rough soil under his boots. The next, he was stuck in a phantom traffic jam, surrounded by honking cars and fuming drivers. The transition was jarring, to say the least. The only problem, the cars were made of potatoes, an absurd twist that made the situation even more surreal. And the drivers were those same pesky ghosts. "Out of my way!" Putin shouted, his voice echoing in the eerie silence. Putin roared, shaking his fist at a spectral babushka in a potato car, shaped like a larder. His frustration was palpable. The babushka simply smiled, a gap-toothed grin that sent shivers down Putin's spine. "Patience, Vladimir," she cackled, her voice dripping with eerie calm. "It's rush hour in the potato dimension." The honking intensified, a cacophony of noise that seemed to come from all directions, a chorus of spectral horns that sounded suspiciously like the cries of 1,000 dying seagulls. The sound was both haunting and maddening. Putin slumped back in his seat, defeated. There was no escape from this bizarre nightmare. This was going to be a long afterlife. The endless line of potato cars stretched out before him, a never-ending loop of frustration and absurdity. Section 6. The chorus of dissenting vegetables. As if the traffic wasn't bad enough, the potato dimension decided to add insult to injury, literally. From the fields surrounding the phantom highway, a chorus of voices arose. "Dictator! shrieked a particularly angry-looking potato. "Warmonger!" yelled a turnip, its leafy top trembling with indignation. "Worst Tsar ever!" bellowed a giant misshapen beet, its voice booming across the potato scape. Putin covered his ears, but the insults kept coming, a relentless barrage of vegetable-based vitriol. Even the sour cream rivers seemed to gurgle with disapproval. He had been called many things in his life: a strongman, a savior, a tyrant. But never, in all his years in power, had he been subjected to the withering criticism of root vegetables. Section 7. An endless loop of borscht. If there was one thing Putin missed from his old life, it was the food. The hearty stews, the caviar, the perfectly grilled shashlik. Each meal was a celebration of flavors, a testament to the rich culinary heritage he had once taken for granted. Here, in the potato dimension, the culinary options left much to be desired. The landscape was barren, with only the occasional potato breaking the monotony. Surely there's something other than potatoes to eat, he wondered aloud, his voice tinged with desperation. He asked one day, his stomach rumbling. The constant diet of potatoes was wearing him down. The potato dimension, in its infinite wisdom, responded by materializing a bowl before him. It seemed almost magical, the way it appeared out of thin air. It was filled with a steaming pink liquid that smelled vaguely familiar. Borscht? Could it be? Putin asked, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Maybe, just maybe, this was a sign that things were looking up. He took a tentative sip. It tasted off. Not the comforting taste he remembered. And by off, he meant like someone had boiled a potato in water and added a dash of vinegar. It was a poor imitation of the real thing. The spectral Russians, of course, found this hilarious. Bon appétit, they jeered, their ghostly forms shaking with laughter. They chorused, their laughter echoing across the potato fields. The sound was both eerie and mocking. Putin pushed the bowl away. He couldn't bring himself to eat another bite. He'd rather starve than eat another bite of this abomination. His resolve hardened. He knew he had to find a way out of this endless loop of borscht. Section 8. The agony of potato ballet. One of the more perplexing aspects of the potato dimension was its insistence on culture, specifically potato-themed ballet. Putin found himself subjected to endless performances of Swan Lake, The Nutcracker, and other classics, all performed by troops of dancing potatoes. The costumes were absurd, the choreography clumsy, and the music, well, the less said about the music, the better. "Make it stop!" Putin pleaded, burying his face in his hands. The spectral Russians predictably found this hilarious, but Vladimir one giggled. It's culture. Putin had never been a fan of the ballet, but this was a special kind of torture. Section 9, no. Escape from potato pop music. If there was one thing worse than potato ballet, it was potato pop music. The potato dimension seemed to have an endless supply of catchy, repetitive tunes, all sung in high-pitched, squeaky voices and featuring lyrics about, you guessed it, potatoes? Spudtacular. You're potato-licious, sang a group of animated potatoes, their voices echoing through Putin's dreams. Putin tried to block it out, but the music followed him everywhere. It was enough to drive him truly mad. I'd rather listen to 1,000 vuvuzelas, he yelled, but his words were drowned out by the relentless cheerfulness of potato pop. The spectral Russians naturally found this hilarious. They even started singing along. Section 10. The unbearable lightness of being a potato. As days turned into weeks, Putin began to notice something strange happening to him. His skin, once tanned and healthy, was taking on a pale, starchy hue. His hair felt brittle, his limbs heavy. He even thought he could feel little sprouts forming on his fingers. "This is impossible," he cried, staring at his reflection in a pool of what he hoped was just water. But there was no denying it. He was turning into a potato. The spectral Russians, predictably, were thrilled. "Welcome to the club, Vladimir," one chuckled. "We've been expecting you." Putin had never felt so helpless, so utterly defeated. Section 11. A starchy eternity. And so Vladimir Putin, former master of the Kremlin, found himself trapped in an endless loop of potato-themed torments. This was no ordinary punishment. It was a surreal nightmare that defied all logic and reason. Forced to endure itchy uniforms that never seemed to stop irritating his skin, phantom traffic jams that led nowhere, and the relentless criticism of sentient vegetables that seemed to have a personal vendetta against him. He began to realize the true extent of his punishment. It was a torment designed to break him down, piece by piece. The potato dimension was more than just a bizarre afterlife. It was a realm where the absurd became the norm. It was a mirror, reflecting back all the absurdity, the pettiness and the trivialities, the sheer ridiculousness of his reign. Every decision, every action now seemed laughably insignificant. And the worst part, there was no escape. No matter how hard he tried, every path led back to the same starchy nightmare. As the spectral Russians continued their torment, their ghostly figures haunting his every step, their laughter echoing through the potato fields, a constant reminder of his eternal punishment, Putin could only wonder, would he ever be free from this starchy eternity? Was there any hope of redemption or escape? The potato dimension, it seemed, wasn't telling. It was a place of endless questions and no answers. And for once, Vladimir Putin had no answers. He was lost in a world of his own making, with no way out.